Well, maybe we just leave that transmitter alone. You can't go back to prison if we're still at war.
The needs of the many.
Worth fighting for. Or worth dying for. But so are the needs of the few.
Or the one.
Huh. That sounds familiar. Welcome to our review of Star Trek Discovery's Episode 8, Vis Pacem para Bellum. I think Latin for if you want peace, prepare for war. But first, let's take a brief tour of the varied ground covered by this episode. All right. We land in the middle of a battle with the USS Gagarin, which goes down with all hands. The Gagarin is named for Earth's first human in space. Stamets is feeling a bit off again.
What are you doing down here, Captain?
Sorry, what?
The Klingons are sharing their new cloaking technology with each other. Good for them. Time to visit the planet of the singing plants. This planet with the singing plants. Turns out the singing plants have a kind of collective sentience. It's like the plant kingdom version of the Borg. Meanwhile, L'Rell lies her way back onto the ship of the dead, controlled by Cole. No, Cole, the Klingon. Thanks. Back on Planeta de las Plantas Cantando, the away team attempts to communicate with the Pavans. Under the guise of torturous interrogation, L'Rell asks Admiral Cornwell for asylum. Plot twist? Come on now, let's pass that Bechdel test together. It's time for that first kiss magic. Again.
Oh, yeah.
It turns out that the Pavans are a kind of sentient planet. Cool. Saru joins with the planet. When in Rome, I guess. Uh-oh. Looks like Saru has new plans for the away team. Cole catches L'Rell trying to escape with Admiral Cornwell. It's time for Plan B. Burnham and Tyler try to outwit the newly invigorated Saru, but it doesn't go well. Uh-oh, I wonder what Tyler is hiding. Saru wins the Pavo 5K just in time to unsuccessfully stop Burnham from contacting Discovery.
Horse kick!
After killing all of L'Rell's old shipmates, Cole allows her to join his team, but plans on torturing her anyway. Klingons. Go figure. Burnham convinces the Pavans to help with the war, so the Pavans call the Klingons? Burnham and Saru begin to understand each other a little better. Hopefully. Alright, so there was a ton of stuff happening in this obvious part 1 of a 2-part episode. Let's discuss. First up, the rumors of Ash Tyler being a Klingon spy just won't die. I mean, we get this interesting scene laden with a double meaning.
Your intentions are false. You've been trying to distract me.
And then, later the Pavans apparently call the Klingons. Did they do that of their own initiative? How did they get the Klingon subspace frequency? Did Tyler give it to them? During the brief time that Tyler and the Pavans were alone with each other?
Mysteries.
If Tyler really was a Klingon spy, and Pavo really had a chance for the Federation of unlocking Klingon cloaking technology, then it makes sense that Tyler would be desperate to call the Klingons and let them know, right? On the other hand, it is still possible for the Pavans to be pulling an errand of mercy here. More on that in just a moment. Speaking of Klingons, L'Rell seems to be lying to Cole, and she also seems to be lying to Admiral Cornwell. So, what gives? Maybe she needs to go aboard Discovery not for the spore drive per se, but so she can activate her boyfriend, Vok. It is still possible that Ash Tyler has no idea he is actually Vok, at least until she goes and turns him on. Coming back to the Pavans, it is noteworthy just how alien they are. Sure, we've seen lots of ephemeral, non-corporeal type aliens before in Star Trek. However, it still doesn't diminish the nicety of having something more alien than a dude in a latex mask. It really is nice. But the aspects inherent to the Pavans, both visually and in action, as when they transport Tyler from the hut to the transmitting tower, resemble that of the multidimensional spores that Discovery is hooked on. Is there a connection between the mushrooms and Pavo? Are the Pavans connected to the multidimensional sporeway? Is Pavo the brain of the fungal network? Decent questions, perhaps. More evidence is needed, obviously. What is clear is that the writers are leaning heavily on the audience's knowledge of the original series episode Errand of Mercy, perhaps as a tactic of misdirection. Errand of Mercy is where the Organians, another non-corporeal race of beings, force the Klingons and the Federation into a kind of peace. It feels like the Pavans are doing something similar, doesn't it? Speaking of referencing circumstances elsewhere in the franchise, Lieutenant Stamets' own multidimensionality feels like a callback, or a call forward, to the Next Generation episode Parallels. In that episode, Worf finds himself bouncing across half a dozen different parallel dimensions or more. Maybe that's what's happening to Stamets. How else do we have a glimpse of a Captain Tilly if it isn't inside some parallel dimension that Stamets can see? Parallels offers us another interesting callback or reference. In this episode of Discovery, we get Burnham and Tyler's first official kiss, again. The previous kiss was erased by virtue of time travel shenanigans. The same goes for Worf and Deanna Troi, who are seen romantically involved in a parallel dimension, only to be seen on screen hooking up in the Prime Universe dimension afterwards. Nothing on this show is an accident, so it's worth taking note of these kinds of things. The biggest happening in this episode is down to Burnham and Saru. Sorry. The relationship between these two is akin to siblings. The overachieving big sister who steals the show and takes her brother for granted, and the jealous little brother who resents being in his sister's shadow. At the beginning of this season, Burnham, whose emotions are suppressed by cold Vulcan logic, makes a big mistake in trusting that logic. She ends up breaking the rules in order to do what she thinks is right. The result was mutiny and court-martial, and Burnham being forced to come to terms with all those emotions she thought were controlled. Saru, on the other hand, is being held hostage by his emotions. Really, just one emotion, fear. And on Pavo, he finds reason to break some rules of his own. The Pavans, after linking up with him, give Saru a taste of a fearless life. And Saru likes it so much that he breaks protocol, lies to the away team, and attacks Tyler and Burnham in an effort to ignore the away team's mission. All to protect that loss of fear. It's actually a bit ironic. He's afraid he'll regain his fear. It isn't quite the same thing as mutiny, but Saru's actions will have consequences. If the writers are smart, they will leave Saru changed for the better, much like how Stamets is being changed by his interaction with the spore drive. What the incident on Pavo also does is give Saru and Burnham another chance to understand each other better. They are coming from opposite spaces, emotionally speaking, but through circumstance, Saru and Burnham might be coming to a place of mutual understanding. It's the scenes between these two and between Burnham and Sarek that add a rich family vibe to the narrative of the show. Discovery continues to explore the themes of the age, too. Perhaps the show is discussing multiculturalism still, in its comparison of fractured, warring Klingon houses uniting under authoritarian rule to the Federation's own issues with unity, in Vulcan's mixed feelings about humanity and the Federation. And specific to this episode, we connect with Saru's desire to stay on Pavo and avoid war. After all, why should the away team care about far-off places, experiencing desperate circumstances, when everything is comfortable right there on the planet of the singing plants? Why can't they stay there and not live in fear? Well, the world is crazy, but just because you're in a comfortable spot doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to help others who aren't. In fact, it can be argued that those of us least affected by unfortunate circumstances might have more power and thus a responsibility to do something to alleviate the pain. Pavo's position as a possible game changer for the Federation means the away team has to do something, despite how safe and harmonious Saru is feeling. Hunkering down and waiting for terrible, unsafe circumstances to pass by is not an option in the modern age. Engagement is a lesson that must be learned before the terrible consequence reaches your door. One last thing, the pacing or the editing for this episode felt a touch off, or maybe rushed. If that is the case, it probably comes down to the changes that were made in making episode 9 be the fall finale instead of this episode. That's fine, but do be aware, CBS, that you can make these things as long as you need to. They're on a streaming service. We will still watch them. Seriously, 40 minutes, 70 minutes, an hour and a half, you have our attention. Feel free to make the episode as long as they need to be. Thank you for watching. If you like this, and other Trekspertise videos, then consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. It is the best way for you to help create more Trekspertise. You can find the link to our Patreon page in the subspace below. All right, that's it. One more episode until the fall break. Are you ready?
遠い将来を考えてみようよ